Ladies and gentlemen, we are back for another episode of West Virginia Right Now. And I'm Chris Miller along with
Wes Thompson.
And we are here with the legendary, I'll call him the doctor of coal right here in West Virginia. This is Chris Hamilton, who is the president of the Coal Association right here in West Virginia. Chris, welcome aboard, sir.
Hey, good day. Great to be here.
We are glad you are here, and we want to talk about something that is cultural here in our state. Aside from the fact that we have mined coal for a very long point in time and done a great job of helping the country produce its cheap energy through a base load, which is what coal is. It's a part of our culture. It's a part of not only our economy, but it's a part of our way of life. And wanted to have you on to talk about lots of different things. One, we're in an interesting time, geopolitically with what's happening in the Ukraine, which has actually increased demand for coal worldwide. And, wanted to talk about some of that stuff, wanted to talk about exactly what coal is. And if you want to, take us to the very beginning about what coal is, where it's mined, how to grade it, and what that means for energy in the world. Let's just have a fun show here. There's a lot to talk about.
Boy, there sure is. A lot going on, a lot of challenges, a lot of history with the industry, and I really appreciate the invitation, the opportunity to come and talk about our industry, because it is one of the state's leading industries. As you correctly point out, it's been around for a long time. We've only been a state for 155 years now, 150. I know I'm going to miss that by one or two, but somewhere in there. And, we were mining in Virginia for 100 years before West Virginia was actually created. So, have a lot of history there. And, it still continues to contribute significantly to our industrial job base here within the state. And obviously generates a lot of revenues, not only for those regions of the state that have active mining operations, but we generate electricity in other parts of the state throughout our all 55 counties. And we have this remarkable coal severance program that's been in place for decades now, where a little bit of those revenues generated by coal that's mined in, say, Boone, Logan, Kanawha, up in Monongalia counties are actually reshuffled and disseminated throughout all 55 counties. Even here in Huntington, where there's not a lot of active coal production today. The city of Huntington, the county of Cabell, and our surrounding county bases, have received millions of dollars of revenues from active coal production that takes place elsewhere in the state. And it's based on population, and there's some other formulas that the state tax department utilizes, but that funds important programs here. It funds programs for the less fortunate, for our seniors, for our vets. It funds a big portion of our local education program and other county and municipal programs.
So let's use this as a chance to really educate everybody out there, because coal is not as simple as we pull black rocks out of mountains. It's so much deeper than that. So I guess the first question I've got is how many tons of coal does West Virginia produce every year?
Right now, we're producing in the neighborhood. We'll finish 2022 probably in the neighborhood of about 85 million tons of coal that's produced. Historically, if you reflect backwards, that's a low point, not the lowest, but it's a low point within the past 4 or 5 decades. We've been averaging about 120, 130 million tons of coal. Of course, everybody knows there's a transition away from coal to other energy forms, and that has led over the past 20 years to an erosion of our 120, 130 million tons of annual production, and we're still the second largest coal producing state within the United States. We are the leading underground coal producing state. That's predominantly what we do. We're the leading metallurgical coal producing state. And metallurgical coal, or met coal as it's called, referred to, it is used to primarily produce steel. And so you cannot have steel without metallurgical coal from here in West Virginia.
And what makes the coal here in West Virginia so special that, that leads to that met coal? What is it?
Oh, it's predominantly coal. It's been in the making for millions of years under intense pressure and heat here within primarily our southern coal fields historically. But we have some newfound metallurgical coal reserves found in northern part of the state.
Where in particular?
In the Upshur County region primarily, and also over in Barber County. Arch Coal has a major investment and development going on there right now. Hundreds of millions of dollars are being invested. At one point, they had over 1,000 contractors that worked there trying to lay out and develop the infrastructure to support that mine for the next 30, 35 years. We have about 13,000 direct coal miners in the state of West Virginia today. And we also have somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50,000 indirect miners that show up at a mine site every day and do some variety of maintenance, mine reclamation, mine specialty, mine engineering, mine technical services. So there's roughly 50, 60,000 people that are directly employed by the industry today. It's major industry. Still represents it's about a $14 billion industry here in the state, and our state only generates $70 billion on an annual basis. So one out of every $5.50 comes from the coal industry today.
Incredible. What is the difference between met and steam coal?
Steam coal, both are very, very high quality. We have the highest quality of all forms of coal within our portfolio here in West Virginia. Steam or thermal coal is typically used to generate or manufacture electricity. And metallurgical coal, or coal with metallurgical values and characteristics, used primarily for steel making and for our infrastructure build-out.
Interesting. And so we produce, are all 85 million tons we're producing right now, is it primarily met, or what's the spread between met and steam coal?
That gap is closing. We used to be predominantly a steam producing state. Probably a lot more steam reserves around the state. Some have been paralyzed because of marketing conditions and the overall assault on the industry. But it's about a 60-40 split today. We still mine a little more steam or thermal used to generate electricity, and about 40%, a little under 40%, is our metallurgical coal used for steel making.
So you hinted on something that I want to really dissect, which is the salt on the industry. And there's a couple of things that I want to dive into. And one, those are prohibitive regulations that stop us from actually producing more coal. And then the other one is the perception of coal, it being dirty, when quite frankly, from my understanding, that's not true at all. So I'd love you to, let's dissect both of those and educate the people out there listening about that. One,
sure.
Yeah, what are some of the regulations that exist that are stopping us from being able to mine coal further?
There's a lot of regulations that have been imposed on the industry, and there's a menu of multiple that come from the Department of Interior, the Environmental Protection Agency primarily. There's also been a rash of regulatory requirements from the Department of Labor, but the single biggest thing here is, we have a president that's utilizing every single resource available to him to coerce or force this whole decarbonization of America. And by the way, carbon-based or fossil fuels, when you add coal and natural gas and oil together, currently represents about 70% of all the power we consume as a nation. I mean, it's absolutely ludicrous to think that we could run this country, without fossil energy, and to try to force that on the American public within a relatively short period of time. just creates unbelievable havoc and problems, and does nothing much more than just add to the cost of doing business, add to the cost of household power, add to the cost of our budgets that are household budgets that are already strained by this ill-conceived energy plan that this administration is administering.
You would think that the idea behind having cheap, clean energy would be appealing and really important for economic growth, but unfortunately that doesn't seem to be the case. Why is it that coal is labeled as dirty or not clean?
That's a great point. I've been around the world visiting other coal assets in other countries, and we've done such a fantastic job, by the way, at the cost of billions and billions of dollars, to upgrade our coal-fired plants, our industrial boilers around the country. I mean, we all can look back on maybe our younger days and view or experience pictures of whether it's Birmingham, Alabama, or Pittsburgh, or even Wheeling up in the northern part of the state is having a lot of contaminants within the airstream. I mean, think back and look and recall the pictures from the industrial age here. But all that's been cleaned up.
Yeah, it looks like a bunch of chimney sweeps.
Yeah, we have the cleanest burning industrial facilities and coal-fired power plants here in West Virginia that you'll find anywhere in the world. I've been to China. I've been around, and those countries haven't put the first after treatment device on a coal-fired generator.
Well, they don't care, and they're producing energy cheaper than we are, even though we are still one of the places in the world where energy is cheapest. But they're doing it without all of the regulatory costs that are forced down, our producers because of the EPA and because of the Department of Interior and that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, without question. China, first of all, consumes about 7 to 8 times more coal than what we do within the United States.
And their population is only about 4.5 our times.
Yes, it is. And they don't use the first, air quality treatment on any of their coal-fired generators.
Now, why would they when we're the ones doing all that stuff and it makes energy more expensive?
Yes.
Why if you're talking about competitive trade, why would you even consider that?
Exactly.
Makes zero sense.
They have as many new coal-fired plants in some varying degree or stage of construction, new plants being constructed, more than what we have existing plants across this country.
How much coal from West Virginia actually goes to China, or do they get a lot of their stuff from Australia?
Very little. Most of theirs comes from Australia. We have been in an global energy market, for as long as we've been producing coal. We ship coal today to about 39 foreign destinations. There's a whole lot of countries that don't have the energy infrastructure and natural resources that we have and some of the other countries have. And, frankly, I strongly believe that because of our accessibility to electricity, coal-fired electricity throughout our lifetime, that's why we have this extraordinary quality of life here in the United States. It's because we've been exposed to and have had a great accessibility to relatively low-cost energy because we have it here, we mine it here, we produce it here.
And the work and the resources that West Virginia has done and provided to the country have literally led to the greatest capitalist expansion in human history. When we, after World War II, started really growing and expanding, a lot of it had to do with the amount of work and resources that came out of West Virginia to then provide the energy through coal to the rest of the country.
No question.
And so we have a major
from
place
both
in
steam
history.
coal,
Yeah.
as well as our met coal. West Virginia coal has led this country through 2 world wars. It's powered us through the industrial age, and it's powered us through the information age. I think, years from now, historians are going to refer to this time we're in today as the energy age. Because of all the movement that's going on, all the competing fuels, and all the emphasis on energy today. Years from now, this is going to be the energy age, and I think West Virginia coal is going to stand out again. We're being called upon today to provide coal to regions of the world that have tinkered and played with a growing renewable portfolio at the expense of coal-fired generators, and they've lost and are losing baseload generation, and they have energy crisis going on today.
Did you see where Switzerland literally told their people, shut down your electric cars, don't charge them?
Yes.
You got winter is coming, and we have to keep our old people warm, and
Yes.
you can't suck up that energy off the system. It's got to go to take care of people.
Yep.
And the potential for that to happen in other places throughout the world is big. And the other thing that, and help me understand this, the thing that I have a hard time wrapping my head around with is, when people talk about, oh, we've got to have electric and we've got to have, batteries, but then you think about none of the negative impacts of mining all those rare earth elements, or the shipping of all of that stuff to build batteries, or all of the waste that goes into building batteries and all of the CO2 byproducts that exist there, from the concrete to the actual transportation of it all, is ever factored into the incentives that go and steer the market when it comes to what costs what. And right now, there's this system in place in my industry that is backed by CAFE standards, where virtually manufacturers are punished if they don't produce certain levels of fuel efficiency in their cars. And so the ones that are rewarded, that get issued all of these coupons, are the ones that produce electric vehicles. And then they sell these coupons on the open market, where other manufacturers like Chrysler and Ford and Chevrolet produce gas vehicles or internal combustion vehicles, have to buy these coupons from, like, let's say Tesla. And what happens is that the cost of that $300,000 Tesla gets driven down to $180,000. Meanwhile, a family of 5 where both parents work and they are middle class, that minivan that they need to move their family around their community in goes from $25,000 to $29,000. And it's this incentive system we put into place is crazy, and it literally winds up costing the middle class more money.
No question.
What is your area of expertise when it comes to batteries and rare earth elements, and how really they're not as efficient as what we're led to believe?
Well, they're hard to extract. I mean, no one's in the rare earth mining business. People talk about that as maybe an alternative to producing coal for electric generation. Maybe we ought to be mining rare earth elements. Well, that's not how we're set up. That's not our business model. We don't have expertise in that area. The mining and extraction of rare earth elements from coal is basically done at the refuse piles and the refuse sites, where tons and tons and tons of carbonous materials, some coal, shales have been deposited, basically as the reject from coal. And so, we're on.
It's in the coal ash.
We're on the front edge of that. I mean, and many miles or decades away from, the commercial viability of actually mining rare earth elements. I mean, it's just research projects going on at the current time, within our university structure.
And the other sad part is that our utility grid system can't handle all of these vehicles on the road today being battery-driven cars without causing brownouts and blackouts countrywide, unless, guess what? We start producing a lot more coal
Yes.
to power our electricity.
Interestingly, 2 things to that point. I'm amused and remain amused at the announcement, the 2 announcements that took place in California a month ago now, where they announced that they were going to discontinue, I think, allowing gas-powered vehicles by a certain date. And then the very next day, they issue the warning, hey, we can't all be charging the few electric vehicles that we have today at the same time because of the drain on our electricity system.
So coal has gone from $40 a ton over the past couple of years to about $400 a ton. Talk to us about what's driving that demand.
Yeah, I mean, boy, I tell you, and here we come on the Christmas season. There'll be no bad children that receive coal in their stockings with coal being at those
That's
price
funny.
levels today.
That's great.
Only those will be rewarded that have done really, really well.
Santa's giving out coal to the good kids now.
Yeah, absolutely. That pricing is probably where it peaked at earlier in the fall, maybe late summer. But it's still considerably higher than what it was, probably more in the $200 range on the spot market for thermal. And we've seen instances where thermal coal has exceeded met coal on a pricing index for the first time in the history of this business because of the really restrained supply side of things and how many countries have backed off coal-fired generation because of rather aggressive climate objectives and goals. And I mean, it's a reflection of all the pressure that's on the supply side of the business today and all this rapid transition. So if you're in the business today, most of my members are doing really, really well. Despite the typical supply chain and other manpower concerns and needs and equipment needs and things like that, mainly because of pricing, and a lot of that's also because of natural gas tripling in price here within a relatively short period of time.
So what you're saying, though, is that the reason why the cost of coal has at minimum gone up 5 to 6 times from where it was a couple of years ago has to do with an increase in demand for coal and then also an increase in the cost to produce it.
That's correct.
So our policies, while people around the world actually are needing more coal, our policies are forcing the increase in the cost of it.
Yes, without question. Again, we're trying to rush. I mean, it's all about, hey, there's a natural transition underway. I mean, there's a natural transition to more electric-powered vehicles and handheld tools. There's a natural transition to a broader or an increase in our renewable portfolio. And when some of the deficiencies are corrected or applied to, like battery storage and transmission of some of the new oncoming renewable power sources, that'll be increased. But it's just something that you can't coerce or rush within a relatively short period of time. I mean, I think we're all finding ourselves buying maybe a battery-powered household tool, maybe a drill, maybe a blower.
As of now in West Virginia, that's powered by coal.
It is.
That's the irony behind the whole thing.
We want everybody in West Virginia to have an electric vehicle.
And electric tools.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question about that. So you got to have that base load generation.
Absolutely.
And coal is the primary power for that at the current time. Nuclear will likely encroach and make some advancements within its technologies and application. And I think there's a lot of optimism that nuclear may have a second run, a new generation of nuclear power facilities that'll also add to the baseload power.
From what I understand, though, if we add nuclear and create some power purchase agreements, it'll actually increase the demand and the production of coal, too.
It could. It just depends on where that goes. Most of the experts I talk with, observe that it's still a couple decades away. Then you have all the social concerns and fears over using nuclear power.
Sure.
It's one thing to talk about nuclear, being as safe as it is today, and it is relatively safe. Still some storage issues there, but it's one thing to talk about on the 40,000-foot level as we are here today. It's another issue to talk about it being actually built somewhere specific.
Absolutely.
So everybody seems to support it generally as maybe an oncoming power source that we can rely on for some of our energy needs in the future. But nobody's talking yet or agreeing to having it built in my backyard.
I was just getting ready to say it's not in my backyard situation. Sounds great, but
Yes.
not here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's one of the unique things about West Virginia in our geographic location. You know, you look at Japan and what happened with that tsunami back in, was it 2011, where it affected a couple of their nuclear power plants and created some disasters. And was it Fukushima? Isn't that
Yes,
right?
that's exactly right.
So West Virginia is impervious to earthquakes and hurricanes and tornadoes and tsunamis and virtually any other sort of natural disaster. One, because of our location and our topography and geography, but then also, two, because of the weather patterns.
That's correct.
So nuclear would be a little safer around here. And I would love to be able to be involved in the conversations of getting nuclear going, knowing that it can actually lead to an increase in coal and coal production and further drive down the cost of power for our people, which I think is pretty important. Why?
And we embrace those discussions.
Well, especially if you get more coal from it.
Oh, absolutely. You know, we come across as opposing renewable energy, wind and solar and nuclear, and it's only because a lot of those forces are also working to decrease the coal dispatch or the coal powered. So I mean, we're in a situation. I don't want to say no lose. I mean, but we do come across sometimes as being against other energy and innovation. That's not the case.
Well, let's be smart though. They put costs and burdens on your guys' industry to drive up the costs and incentivize stuff like windmills, that if you put a windmill in West Virginia, not only one, are you if you're worried about CO2 emissions, building windmills is just the process of producing them is very, very high. And then they don't ever generate anywhere near the power or electricity required to justify the increase in cost for coal.
Yes.
So, it's from a pragmatic standpoint and an economic standpoint, it's dumb. It's a dumb policy. So,
it is.
You guys make sense when you want to question why we're doing that and how we're doing that.
Well, think about this too. I mean, we mine coal here in West Virginia, and by the way, we just don't only export it to foreign destinations and consume it here, but we used to ship coal practically every state east of the Mississippi. Now that market's been shrunk down, but we still export coal to some 15, 16 other states. There's about 60 power plants and coal manufacturing facilities within those 15 states, and they rely on our coal. They have to have coal because of their base load generation needs and demand, and it's the way their system is set up. But we mine it here, we consume it here, we generate the power for West Virginians here. It's the most secured power delivery system you'll have anywhere. It's not subject to mischief or vandalism. You don't have to you don't have to use it when the sun's shining or the wind's blowing. We do use it 24/7. High percentage of base load generation. Our miners are from here. I mean, these are great Americans, by the way, in my view. I mean, I don't think there's a more honorable profession you'll find anywhere. These are really good West Virginians. They have our values. Their spouses are teachers or educators or nurses around the state. They spend their dollars here. We go replacing these coal plants that we have, and again, they're amongst the cleanest burning. I mean, they have absolutely removed all contaminants from the emission stream, but for a little carbon dioxide today. What you see coming out of these coal-fired generators is basically water vapor or steam today. But my point is, it's just it's a closed-loop system. It's West Virginians that are employed there. If we go replacing those with wind generators or nuclear plants, chances are we will be importing our power. The profits will go out of West Virginia. There'll be fewer workers. And, we potentially even become a state that imports power if we discontinue fossil energy production.
Let's transition into something that I think is important to dissect, which is that Supreme Court case, West Virginia versus the EPA. Because from what I understand, what that does is that it doesn't allow the EPA and the federal government to limit the amount of CO2 emissions that exist from a state's own sovereign ability to produce energy. Is that the right way to kind of explain that?
I think it is. So our Attorney General prevailed before our Supreme Court in getting an injunction against EPA from implementing the strategy that was basically going to cause a major shift in energy markets and major dislocation here of economic interest.
How do you think that plays out and what West Virginia can do with its own energy production in the future?
Well, I think it certainly work to our advantage. We have the ability to continue utilizing coal-fired generation, and these plants that we have, they are aging. So there's some upgrades that can be made to keep them operational here for another 25, 30 years. But even at that, that's a relatively short period of time. So we do have the ability to begin planning for our next generation of electric generation here within the state. We think coal is going to continue to play a role, probably a reduced role after we get through the next couple of decades. But we have the ability to design our own system. We really do. And should not accept someone else's system being imposed on us.
What I'm wondering is if that it puts us in a position where we can effectively, if we create the right system, export power by increasing coal production and the power produced by our power plants to not only have the power affect our people here, but then export power outside of the state through connectivity.
Absolutely. I don't think there's any question about that. We're exporting a lot of our power now. We consume, I forget what the number is, I want to say 65, 70% of the power we generate. But we're not generating everything at full capacity right now either. So we do have the ability to generate, greater volumes of excess power to our surrounding states and elsewhere. In fact, there's discussions going on. The state of Virginia and the state of Pennsylvania have both implemented at the state level anti-fossil energy initiatives. And they are calling on us right now to keep our baseload generation flowing into their states because of concerns they've had.
How much are they going to pay us is kind of my question, right?
That's at our ability to set that pricing as well.
And they're going to have it because it's
Yes.
funny because they get a base inside of that state that gets intoxicated with the entire identity, the entire idea behind green energy. And meanwhile, what they don't realize is that we're going to be the ones producing the energy through coal and giving it to them.
Yes.
To keep their energy affordable. Great irony.
It's
isn't it?
kind of the way this grid's configured, and these power companies and the utilities are configured. The John Amos plant just over in Putnam County, 25 crow flight miles from here, sends half of its power to the state of Virginia through the grid, and the Mitchell power plant up in Marshall County sends part of its power to the state of Kentucky. And same with the Mountaineer plant; it goes to multi-states.
Interesting.
And we have the ability to just adjust those rates going forward to make it more commensurate with the value of that energy. There are really. I don't want to be chicken doolittle here, but we are on the verge of seeing some energy crises here from a reliability standpoint. Our grid operators have been warned by NERC, which is sort of the federal North American Reliability Commission, to preserve your baseload power. They have warned against closing additional coal plants. They've warned states, they've warned this federal administration, they've warned the president and EPA, you're going too fast. Our grid is not set up to accommodate this major power switch here, and you're losing too much of your baseload generation that we may very well have to call upon, if we have these extended periods of winter, with freezing days and sub-zero temperatures.
Which means we got to burn more coal to keep
absolutely.
people warm,
The plants, we've had the polar vortex a couple years ago and a bomb cyclone where we've had to call on our coal fleet to generate higher volumes of power during those periods. And that fleet in totality is not there today. So we could be in a real mess, and we could see rolling brownouts and blackouts like we saw this summer. State of Ohio experienced some all through Columbus. Texas has experienced a few. California seems like they experience them repeatedly.
Oh, all the time. What were the reasons that Ohio experienced the rolling brownouts?
I'm not really sure, but Ohio, like a lot of states, Ohio has moved to a lower baseload generation value. So I don't know if that played into it or not. It didn't last very long at the time. Sure, it wasn't dissected like the Texas situation a couple years ago.
What are some of the things that are affecting the supply chain when it comes to the coal industry?
Well, I think the things we're looking at are very. It's supply chain post-COVID shutdown. I mean, we have real manpower needs that exist today. When we had high pricing levels like we're seeing today, we had the ability to shoot ourselves in the foot real quick and create a response to that by just mining a little more coal, putting on a few more units, and we'd bring that pricing bonanza back down to normal rates. But the mining operations that are in business today, they're at full capacity. I mean, they have a reserve base that may last for another 35 or 40 years, but they are having difficulty finding experienced miners and workers that are willing to, go get into the industry. A lot of that has to do with the messaging too, and the mindset that there's an assault on the industry, and there's a lot of people thinking it may not have a future.
That's something that I wanted more than once in this conversation to kind of jump in on. There are things that you said today I had no idea about, right? And you said it earlier, a 40,000 foot view and how it's sort of seen. And multiple times I've thought to myself, it sounds like the coal industry needs marketing and messaging. And because, in other words, I think the average person has no idea that these things have been upgraded, I think earlier the word you used was water vapor coming out of it. So just those words, this one emits water vapor. Everybody would see it the chimney sweep way that Chris was talking about. They would see it like that. The 40,000 foot view of it is coal evil, hurts the environment. And then imagine going back to the same people and going, do you understand the irony in the electric car situation? In other words, the more electric cars you need, the more coal you're going to need to supply it, right?
Yes.
I don't believe that there's a good enough job being done to market that to people. And I believe that I am inundated with solar messaging, wind messaging, green messaging. I feel like people should be educated about this more. I think just listening to this today, I'm like, I wish more people knew that. And really just a lot of the irony of it.
I love the way your mind works, by the way. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you can see a commercial being created where it's like, as we move to more renewable energy sources like batteries, there's going to be a huge demand to make sure that we're producing clean coal. And at the West Virginia Coal Association, we're involved in producing such clean coal that the only byproduct is, and it's just a little spout, a little water coming off being caught, is water.
And if I was doing the marketing, what I would try to do is I would try to find someone from outside of West Virginia to tell the story.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't seem to be self-benefit, right? I want someone else to come in and go, hey, I want to actually tell you the truth about this. Here's actually the reality. In fact, the sheer amount of coal that is still being mined blows my mind. The number of jobs that are still being held. You said 50,000 when you start adding in the people that are coming and doing tech jobs, support work.
Energy contractors, all this
right.
stuff, yeah.
I don't think the average person realizes that. I think they see it as, coal is done, let's move on.
It's about 500,000 nationally.
Unreal.
It's just an amazing amount of.
I think people don't realize how much exports. I don't think people realize how much coal is, or energy is exported to other states. I don't think that's a narrative that's understood.
I don't disagree. I mean, I don't disagree with anything that you've said. There's a lot of narrative being created and being that's working against us. There's no question about that. And frankly, there's a lot of preponderance of liberal media forces. But politics aside, we could do a lot better than what we're doing.
Well, the only way to combat lies is the truth.
That's correct. That's correct.
And just educating people, which is also what we're doing here today. Which
But the policymakers understand. The people that vote on coal issues understand. I think we do a great job lobbying. We have we have a special political leadership, I think, that understands the value of this industry, and they, from our governor to our congressional representatives to our state political leadership, people get that.
But even politicians, they create their platform based on the data of the emotional responses of voters, right? So if the voters' emotional response is not logic, not pragmatism, not reality, that their emotional response is it's bad, then you have to combat that at the voter level. You have to convince the people, because if they start believing that it's not, and if they start using words like water vapor, right, then all of a sudden these politicians would feel more comfortable coming out and saying, hey, we're going to support this. But if they feel like there's an emotional element that's negative against it, then they're afraid to say it. So I feel like the emotional response starts to dictate policy.
There's some perceptions that are created that work against some of the things I said in your water vapor comment. When people think of coal mining, they see black.
Yes.
They see a black.
I didn't mean to zero in on that, but that was something that stuck in my head.
It's very easy. And
Sure.
You know how creating narratives and messaging works here. You say, hey, coal's dirty, it's black. I got to spend 5 minutes explaining how it's really not.
Right. So we can we figure out how to say it in 30 seconds, right?
I think there's been a lot of messaging working against us over the years,
Sure.
And I think that the indoctrination or introduction of coal to our youth, I think over a couple generations now through Nickelodeon and other media that has just had an opinion on it and has voiced that through their own messaging, and I think there's also some a whole core of elementary, junior high school, and high school science teachers that have been unbalanced or unfair in their discussion of climate change and what's causing climate change. And so there's a lot of things, that's worked against fossil energy.
It sounds like the very things that you're suggesting have worked against, which I agree with. I think it sounds like exactly what I'm suggesting in the other direction, right? It is. In other words, there almost needs to be. I don't know how much there is. I'm an advertising guy. I'm not I don't know the insides you do of the coal industry. I would just think that I would be in constant motion trying to get this messaging corrected.
This just dawned on me really quickly. I have a brilliant idea. Let's just remarket and rebrand coal. We're just going to call it vapor emitting carbon.
I got to be honest with you, Chris. I feel like I just came up with that 30 seconds ago.
I think it's brilliant.
Now, I'm reluctant to tell you the millions and millions of dollars we've used
to try to do this.
do this.
You didn't have Wes Thompson here.
And when you're
I just solved it.
Yeah.
And when you're in a period of austerity and then survivability, it's unfortunate, and it's
the chess moves are so complex.
It probably shouldn't work this way. But
I'm oversimplifying a very complex issue.
PR programs aren't the first to go, but they're real close to.
I get it.
Getting reduced.
Advertising's an expense. Yeah.
Wait, hang on. Compressed vapor emitting carbon.
That's it. That's what it's called now.
That's it.
Compressed vapor emitting carbon.
Compressed vapor emitting carbon.
West Virginia, the home of.
It's kind of interesting. I get involved, obviously, with PR and messaging.
Sure.
And we had a whole Friends of Coal campaign that we had two of our Hall of Fame coaches here in West Virginia out speaking. Was very well done. Millions and millions of dollars every year.
Sure.
And I don't take exception to the characterization that the industry ought to do more and should be doing more. I don't take exception to that at all, but boy, there's some PR people in my business that do. It's like, don't they know that we done this and we done that? We got coal in the classrooms, and we're on radio every hour, and we got television commercials. I mean, there is a lot going on regionally and nationally.
But looking at it like this, Chris, just understanding marketing, it's almost like the country's here and we're responding with the coal marketing, and instead we need to get up here.
And in other words, if when my clients hold me accountable for the result, so if I go to a client and say, but hey, I did X, Y, Z, A, B, C, 1, 2, and 3. Look at all the stuff I did and the money we spent trying to do it. If they go backwards in sales, I'm fired. I'm still, you know what I mean? And I'm certainly, again, I'm so confident that I am oversimplifying a very complex situation.
Well,
but I will say that what's been happening, obviously, is not beating out what I'm getting from the other renewable energies.
Let me say this, too. I think the issue that we're talking about here is important enough to the state of West Virginia that the state of West Virginia ought to consider a pushback, a public education system on energy as well. And here's the example I use.
A nationwide publication, that everyone needs to see.
If this president and federal administration, instead of trying to prohibit the use of coal, would attempt to prohibit the use of oranges for whatever reason.
Sure. Yeah.
You would see Rick DeSantis on television every single night telling them how ludicrous they are.
And the Tropicana people would have a documentary film made. Yes.
Tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow. So there's a partnership, I think. No state has more to gain or lose over its fossil energy portfolio than West Virginia. Because of the revenues, if you just look at the numbers, the revenues alone.
Well, and if you take the revenues and out of it, think about all the other applications, right? And the places it's going. There are people benefiting from West Virginia coal. It's bigger than the state.
It is.
I just think that's messaging that's lost.
It also falls in place with what's happening with us geopolitically right now, which is what's going on in Ukraine and what's happening in Russia. And now all of a sudden in Europe, where they've always gone like, no, coal is bad. Like they're all of a sudden they're like.
By the way, amazing European accent.
You're very good at it. My German accent.
Okay. Well, that sounded Austrian. I'm going to be honest with you.
Okay,
you know what? You're all over the place today, and I know you do good accents.
But that's the point, though. There is now an increase in demand in even places like Europe for what we have. If we can just get more of it out of the mountains. And in particular, from what I understand, one of the things that's slowing things down when it comes to the amount of coal that we're able to produce is how much we can get out of the mountains because of the rail systems being bogged down with labor shortages and labor issues, and also infrastructure issues.
Yes.
How do
we talked about supply chain things and post-COVID, and manpower comes out, equipment comes out. Rail service has definitely been an issue. We've been working with the railroad. We've been working with some elected officials that want to sit in oversight of the railroad and try to impose their will, trying to for the rail service to become a little more efficient. But they are, to their defense, and they are experiencing some of the same problems with manpower and equipment. And they've also done some scheduling changes, which we observed earlier this year. And they wanted to, based on their calculations, they totally misread the opportunities we had to expand our production capabilities. And we're not prepared to move that coal to market. At midsummer, we had an unacceptable level of coal sitting stockpiled at the mine site, not being transported to end users and markets. Markets were lost. We actually had to adjust work schedules. We had to stop operation at a couple mining operators. There was just no place to put the coal, nowhere else to put the product on the surface areas around the mine where you traditionally would do it. But we've been working with the railroad. We've had multiple meetings, trying to improve efficiencies. I'd like to think that has worked. We've had numerous reports indicating that the rail service had improved in southern West Virginia, in particularly. Northern West Virginia, north central, still a problem. We've also had waterway issues. We had extremely low, water in Mississippi that was inhibiting exports, down through Mobile. We've had concerns on the Ohio River with some of the locks and dams. So it's we've had a perfect storm working against us in a lot of ways, despite the fact that we have this golden opportunity that's just staring at us as well. But the other thing is, we escaped a real catastrophic situation with the rail last week when they were heading for a strike. I believe it was last Friday. The Congress intervened and used an old section of law that if national commerce is potentially impacted in an adverse way, they have the ability to step in, which they did with the railroad, and essentially blocked a strike from occurring last Friday. I mean, there's a lot of businesses and industries that would have been impacted from that, agriculture and chemical, even the natural gas and transportation of the liquefied natural gas. But our business would have, rail strike for any length of time, I mean, in a matter of a week would have been just catastrophic. So we were glad to see Congress intervene. And
are there issues with CSX and Norfolk Southern, for example, that provide rail services in West Virginia? Are there issues with them not having enough laborers? Is that part of the problem?
It's a combination of factors, but they do have a labor shortage as well.
Do they have an abundance of rail cars without cars without people to actually, without the conductors or the engineers? Is that part of the issue?
I don't believe that's part of the issue.
Okay.
They've done a great job of hiding the cars that we singled out.
Okay. Well,
I don't know where they are today, but we said, hey, down at the Huntington Depot, there's been 48 cars just sitting there, not moving, and over here in this part of the state, there's been a couple hundred cars, abandoned, empty cars, just sitting there. Well, when we started to make those observations, all of a sudden those cars disappear. We're not sure where they are, but. They found a more convenient, out-of-sight place to store those cars.
The first thing I'm hearing is that, okay, well, let's lease the cars to the coal mines and let them use the engines to get them out to where it needs to go. Mm-hmm. I may not understand completely exactly how to solve all those problems, but that's the first place my head goes. Mm-hmm. They've got from what I understood, they had all these available cars that weren't being used, and we might as well put them to use.
Yes.
But then they'll want to protect the usage of the rail itself, too, won't they?
They do.
Yeah.
No question.
Is that a cooperative relationship or more of a combative relationship between rail and coal?
Well, we're still trying to figure out why it costs a little bit more to haul a ton of met coal than it does steam coal. But, there's some arbitrary practices on their part, but they're part of the broader coal economy. I mean, they do have a vested interest in this business, and but it's it's like fighting with your brother. I mean, we try to keep that for the most part behind closed doors and in-house, and everybody's looking for a solution.
I understand,
as opposed to taking it out on Main Street.
Shame on me for thinking that if you're hauling 2 tons of bean bags or 2 tons of coal, the cost would be the same.
You would think.
You'd think,
tons
right?
a ton.
Yeah, tons a ton. Yeah, 2 tons of candy bars, 2 tons of coal. What's the difference?
Diabetes.
Okay. Diabetes versus energy. Fair.
Yeah.
Fair. So, Chris.
And we're going to continue that dialogue with them. And, we have the same relationship with our 2 major utilities in the state of West Virginia with American Electric Power and First Energy. I mean, it's our biggest customer. So we have to be sensitive and respectful for that, and we are. But on the other hand, when we hear reports that they're thinking of replacing a coal plant with a solar farm, we get a little sensitive to that too, and quickly point out that issue.
Well, I would say as West Virginia citizens, understanding how our utility grid system works and our utility system works, we should all be very, very sensitive about hearing anything about, oh, well, we're going to get rid of this coal-fired power plant and put up a bunch of windmills or solar farms. That will not lead to a similar stability in energy costs, let alone a reduction. That will lead to a dramatic increase in what we all pay for energy. And I'll tell you right now, Ma and Paul Kettle on their white picket fence, both of them making Social Security, they cannot afford their energy bill to go up by 25 to 30%.
No.
There's a commercial.
Not.
And that's what these policies are doing. Yeah, that is exactly what they're doing. What they need is they need their power bill to be cut in half. And how do we do that? Coal.
Yes.
Producing
Still
more of
the
it.
cheapest way to
Yes.
generate electricity, household and industrial, without question. It's about half the cost of generating electricity with solar, substantially less than wind, about half of gas today. And, the utilities also have the ability to buy power off the open market, which is about 3 times what it costs to generate electricity with coal.
Do we have any coal power plants that still could be in use now that are not in the state of West Virginia?
No, but they could all ramp up. They could all increase their stocks. They could all, generate more coal than what they do.
Do we have any coal
We haven't, but bear in mind, both our major utilities have also announced that they're going to a zero carbonization too. I mean, they've announced that. So, often we question whether the local guys that we work with and have a great rapport with are committed to the same end result as their corporate office and board of directors that sit in Columbus High or Akron High.
Interesting.
Yes.
That also, it's interesting how that fares up with the West Virginia versus EPA court decision.
It is.
Too,
It is.
because we don't have to take that into account now.
No.
What else do you want to tell the viewers out there that are watching and listening to this about coal that they need to know that we may not have touched base with or touched on?
I just think that the fact that it's such an important aspect of what we do here in West Virginia, and the fact that it can very well be an important part of our future going forward. The reports of coal's death have been highly exaggerated. There's no question about that. But we do have a lot of forces, a lot of political forces, a lot of political agendas that are working against the industry. We talked about some of the things that's creating challenges. There's also great opportunities today. There's no reason that we shouldn't be mining 125 million tons of coal today. I think there's a lot of career opportunities within the industry, just not at the mining or extractive level. But hey, we also employ lawyers and accountants and just regimes of administrative personnel. There's a future in mining. We have the most and the richest metallurgical deposits here within our state than you'll find in any other state or any other place in the world. And you cannot make steel out of wind, solar, or nuclear. It has to be made with West Virginia coal.
How many more years of met coal and steam coal is there left in West Virginia?
We have several hundred years of
Wow.
Economic reserves that we could be extracting from.
At minimum.
At minimum.
That's a good thing to know.
It's a good thing to know. It's a good thing to have, obviously. But when you think of historian time frames, that's a relatively short period of time too. So we're realistic. We view coal as a sort of an interim fuel for
Of course.
electric generation and power generation. But it's what we do here. It's what we have. We are so blessed to have the natural resources that we have as a state in our region. And as we discussed earlier, it just brings a lot of joy to a lot of people, and it impacts practically. I'm always amazed. One of the first things I do when I go speak at a class, and especially a class, science class or a college class, where I anticipate there might be a higher percentage of people that like shining objects as opposed to coal and some of what we do. And first thing I'll ask is how many people in here have a relative that works within the coal industry, or a grandfather, or a father, or an uncle, or a neighbor. And almost without exception, everybody in that room will raise their hand. I mean, the overall impact of the industry on our state's remarkable.
It really is.
And all the millions of dollars of value and revenues it provides the state in all 55 counties.
It's something we should be proud of.
We absolutely should.
And it is wired in our history. And as things look right now, it's going to be wired in our future.
Yes.
Yeah, because the future of our state and the future of affordable energy in this country is still going to revolve around coal. And
Yes.
It sounds like you guys in your industry have done everything possible to make sure that the stigma against it being, chimney sweeps and big black smokestacks has been reduced to completely just vapor.
Yes, without question. We've made tremendous progress, and that's where the partnership with our electric utilities, they've made tremendous progress. We've removed every contaminant. None of us even thought of carbon dioxide being an issue until just a few short years ago. And to the extent that it contributes to the global climate change and should be dealt with, it's a global issue, and it makes little sense to us. For China to be consuming 6-7 times more than we do and have as many power plants in some stage of construction, new plants, than what we have all over America. West Virginia, the United States, is not a planet. Neither are a planet. They're part of a planet with these other countries that seem to be ramping up their consumption, their production of fossil energy, as we appear to be wanting to duplicate our nation's energy plan after the state of California, which has revealed failure after failure. Not so much for what they're doing, but it's within the closed, short time frame they're trying to push and trying to rush it all in.
I read something very interesting, and this leads to the importance of the future of what coal is. The country of Nigeria, by the year 2085, will have more people in it than China will. And if you think about all of that and the developing, what is now the next section of the developing world, guess what they're going to need? Energy. Guess what they're going to need? Steel. And guess what we're going to be able to continue to produce? That.
Yep.
Chris, I'd like to thank you so much for coming on. On behalf of the 1.8 million fellow West Virginians that live here in our state, we'd like to thank you and the 13,000 miners and the 50,000 additional employees that your association represents for keeping West Virginia going, for providing the energy that the rest of the world needs. And, we might live in a time where it's kind of looked down upon, but you and I both know that that is complete and utter ridiculousness. And it literally is one of the direct reasons why our country is so great, is because of the hard work and the cheap energy the coal industry has provided for us.
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to be able to tell a little side of our story.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Chris Miller along with
Wes Thompson.
And this has been West Virginia Right Now, West Virginia Now with
It's
our
right
guest.
Now. It's right now. You had it right the first time.
With our guest, the president of the Coal Association, Chris Hamilton. You want to redo that outro, or are we good?
I think we're good.
I think it's real. I think you keep it real.